On a warm glowing afternoon in the heart of the city, sunlight spilled through the tall glass windows of the prestigious Calderon Hotel, casting sharp reflections across polished marble floors. The grand banquet hall buzzed with confidence, elegance, and the quiet arrogance that often follows people who believe they already know everyone who matters. Yet among these sharply dressed executives and high-ranking guests, a man named Marcellus Grant stood quietly near the corner, invisible to the very people who depended on him. He arrived early, wearing a slightly worn navy suit and carrying the calm dignity of someone who had learned, sometimes painfully, how to survive judgment. But nothing could have prepared him for what was about to happen next, or how the daylight outside would feel painfully brighter after the humiliation he was about to endure. If you believe kindness and second chances still matter in this world, then please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner, where stories like this live to remind us that humanity is still worth fighting for. Marcellus had attended the luncheon with an unassuming presence. He moved quietly, offering small nods and soft smiles, careful not to disturb anyone. The executives of Warren and Creed Holdings were celebrating the near signing of a $600 million partnership deal. The company they were merging with, a firm anonymously known as Gentry Dynamics, was rumored to be led by a mysterious owner who rarely showed up at public events. What no one in the room knew was that Marcellus himself was that owner. But in his plain suit and gentle manner, nobody looked twice at him. Across the room, Charlotte Hale, the confident and sharp-tongued director of operations, was already irritated by the sight of him. She didn't like when unimportant guests stood near the premium tables, especially when they didn't look like they belonged. Her friend and colleague Trent Verdon, a tall, charming man with an ego polished enough to reflect the ceiling lights, joined her in noticing Marcellus as the waiters prepared to refill glasses for the upcoming toast. Afternoon light gleamed across Charlotte's wine glass as she smirked and whispered too loudly that someone dressed like that must have wandered in from the staff lockers. She didn't know Marcellus had heard her, didn't care if he had, and didn't notice the way he lowered his gaze to hide the sting of embarrassment. Marcellus had known judgment his whole life, from the years he spent in a struggling neighborhood to the days he worked as a janitor while slowly building the quiet empire that now financed half the deals in the room. But no achievement could fully erase memories of the past. He still carried every bruise of every assumption people made about him based on nothing but appearances. When Marcellus accidentally stepped back slightly and bumped the corner of Charlotte's chair, she stood abruptly, feigning shock. Trent burst into laughter, and without a moment to think, Charlotte reached for her half-full glass of red wine, lifted it with an exaggerated grin, and tipped it over his head. Warm wine dripped down his forehead, across his suit, onto the polished floor. Gasps erupted around the room as color stained his clothing and humiliation burned through him hotter than the summer sun outside. Charlotte laughed. Trent laughed even harder. A few people tried to hide their amusement behind napkins. And for one tiny, cruel moment, Marcellus became a spectacle, a grown man soaked in wine in broad daylight, surrounded by strangers pretending to be superior. He swallowed hard, remembering every moment in his past when dignity had been taken from him, every time he had stood powerless in front of mockery. Instead of reacting, he simply straightened his posture, closed his eyes for a brief breath, and walked calmly toward the restroom. The room murmured. Some felt guilty, most didn't. Inside the restroom, as he wiped the wine from his face, he looked into the mirror at his reflection, the same reflection he'd seen for decades. A man who wasn't loud, wasn't flashy, didn't fit into their arrogant mold, but also a man who had built a company worth hundreds of millions from nothing but resilience. He whispered to himself the same phrase his grandmother used to say, "Don't let their blindness make you lose sight of yourself." An hour later, when all the executives were seated for the official presentation, the room brightened and the hotel staff closed the doors. Charlotte and Trent sat confidently in front, unaware that their laughter earlier would soon echo back at them in a way they never expected. The CEO of Warren and Creed, Leonard Bryson, took the stage and cleared his throat. Today was the big reveal of the mysterious owner of Gentry Dynamics, the men they needed to impress, honor, negotiate with, and respect. The same men who had walked past them unnoticed just hours before. When Leonard announced the name Marcellus Grant, the room erupted with confused whispers. Trent froze. Charlotte blinked rapidly, her confident smirk evaporating, and then Marcellus stepped into the spotlight, wearing the same suit stained with the dried reminder of their cruelty. Sunlight from the tall windows washed over him as he approached the stage with a calmness that silenced the entire hall. He didn't look angry. He didn't look vengeful. He simply looked disappointed, and sometimes disappointment is heavier than rage. He didn't point anyone out. Instead, with a voice steady as a river, he spoke of respect, humility, and the responsibility that comes with power. He spoke of how true leadership wasn't defined by appearance or status, but by kindness, especially toward those who cannot offer anything in return. Some people shifted uncomfortably, realizing just how painfully his words fit what had happened earlier. Charlotte's hands trembled. Trent lowered his gaze, and as Marcellus concluded his short speech, the weight of their actions settled heavily in the room. The deal went forward not because Marcelli's needed them, but because he believed thousands of employees depended on the stability it would bring. His grace, even after humiliation, became a lesson many in the room would never forget. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Your support helps us spread more stories that inspire compassion. Before the ending, please take a moment to comment below. What lesson did this story remind you of today? As Marcellus left the hotel that afternoon, sunlight warmed the city streets. People walked by without knowing the strength it took for him to rise above his past and the cruelty of strangers. But he didn't walk away defeated. He walked away as a reminder that dignity shines brightest in the daylight, especially when the world tries to dim it.